Good morning. I am Dante Kling Ang, Chairman and CEO of the Manila Times. Welcome to today's roundtable. We have our guest today, the Russian ambassador to the Philippines, His Excellency Marat Pavlov. Your Excellency, good morning, sir.
Good morning. Thank you so much for this invitation, for your
Yes,
readiness to hear Russian position on the situation.
Well, yes, sir. Well, Russia and Ukraine have been in the news, but perhaps we should hear first from you, because you asked for this meeting and you, I think, wanted to give us a briefing on the things that are going on in Eastern Europe. Go ahead, Your Excellency.
Surely. Thank you once again that you give me the floor to explain our position on this very difficult situation created recently. But maybe I will introduce myself by few words, and then after my introduction, maybe your questions can be explain the situation in full. So we are conducting special military operation in Ukraine. The aim is very clear: the ending war in Lugansk and Donetsk, two regions in Ukraine, which has been ongoing there for 8 long years. So our goal is not to occupy or invade Ukraine, but to protect the people of Lugansk and Donetsk, who has been suffering for these 8 long years, and we would like to liberate them from atrocity performed by Ukrainian army. So I'm repeating maybe the same thing, but I'd like to be more precise that our goal to protect the people who lived in Donbass. You can ask me how? By demilitarization and denazification of Ukraine. Maybe I can start with the history of the conflict, if you don't mind, but I'd like to be, if you don't mind.
No, go ahead.
It will be the same your question. What will be the origin of the situation? I can explain that we thinking the regional situation is in the coup d'etat that was occurred in 2014.
The Orange Revolution.
Revolution. You call revolution. We are calling it a coup d'etat.
Okay.
Because I'd like you to remind that we have to be more very attentive to the details of the situation, because before this coup d'etat, we have the Russian side proposed many things, including the conducting of negotiations between the incumbent authorities and the you call the revolutionaries. But in any way, I think that we would like to analyze the situation as whole. So when in February, 3 ministries of foreign affairs, it means Polish minister, Ministry of France and Germany, reached Kiev. They signed with the incumbent authorities some kind of agreement, and this agreement was very clear: to leave the situation as it was, with the possible of political tracked as political solution. But unfortunately, this agreement remain unvalid. So the following facts and the following events are well known and are related to Crimea and southeastern Ukraine situation. The Kiev Authority, despite our efforts to conduct political consultation, started conducting military operation on the territory, in Donbass especially. They conducted 2 large-scale punitive operations with use of heavy weapons and combat aircraft. They attacked Donbass directly with tanks and bombed its square from aircraft. Both military campaigns failed, so we decided to elaborate another mechanism. And you know very well that this mechanism is so-called Minsk agreements, or the package of measures, the official name of this agreements. So they show the way to a peaceful settlement of these conflicts. And we did everything we could to let the development follows in this area to restore Ukraine's territorial integrity, to protect the interest of the people who live in these territories. And I'd like you to remind that Petro Poroshenko, the president of Ukraine, signed Minsk agreements. And the decision of Minsk agreement was approved by Germany, France, and Russia. And after that, it was approved also by the UN Security Council. But the fact is that neither France nor Germany, and I can say that the whole community did anything to force Ukraine to fulfill them. Unfortunately, they decided to accuse my country, the Russian, of failing to fulfill this agreement. But I'd like you to know that the Russia, it is not the part of this conflict, it's not part of the agreement. The agreement was signed between Kiev and Donbass regions. That is why we are trying to understand how can Russia could be accused of this failure without being a part of this same agreements. May I continue if you don't mind? Or well, I can stop here.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'd like to ask a question before we go further.
Surely.
And forgive me for if it's too basic, but I just can't understand why is it Russia's responsibility and to do as you say, and then second, your forces are in Ukraine, so they're not just in the Donbass region. They're right now around Kyiv. There are news that forces may be bearing down also on Odessa. So beyond the Donbass region, your military action, as you call it, of course, some people call it invasion, is going beyond the areas that you've mentioned.
But maybe you have the same mistake that I've just
so help us understand.
No, mistake. Excuse me that I've called it a mistake, but maybe it's a mistake of technical mistake. You didn't hear me that what we are doing now in Ukraine are concentrated on 2 or 3 key points. First of all, we would like to demilitarize Ukraine because we are feeling the threat from this part of this territory. What does it mean, militarization on our point of view? We must understand clearly what weapons there are, where they are deployed, and who controls them. We need a neutral status of this territory. That is why we are conducting this special military operation. And as I know, and my president also mentioned it, that the General Staff and Defense Ministry just achieve some military goals. It means they are destroying the military infrastructure in Ukraine. And this work has been practically finished. Why, you can ask me, why we are looking for demilitarized Ukraine? It's rather clear because we are involved in a situation where when we are threatened by the huge mass of weapons that could be destroy also Russia, and it's against our national interests. I can explain you.
I understand. Your president also mentioned the expansion of NATO.
Yes,
quite often.
Yes. It's very connected issue.
Help us understand that part, because we saw the Baltics are already part of NATO, but Russia seems more sensitive when it comes to Ukraine possibly joining NATO, and as well as Georgia possibly joining NATO. What is the difference between the Baltic states and Ukraine, for instance?
Sure, a very good question. And in the same your question, you are putting a very interesting detail. So I'd like to emphasize that Ukraine itself is not a problem. The main problem for us is the security of Russia.
Okay.
So with conducting a special military operation in the territory of Ukraine, we prevent much worse situation. It means the war with NATO. So Ukraine membership in NATO means for us the deployment of the alliance military infrastructure in the vicinity of our borders. You can imagine the situation is very, very simple. From the Ukraine territory, it takes only 4 to 5 minutes to reach the heart of Moscow with missiles, in case it will be deployed on the Ukraine territory. But it's understandable for us that we should do something to eliminate this threat. So we proposed measures including guarantees that NATO will not advance eastward, including the accession of Ukraine and other countries into the alliance, as well as non-deployment of serious offensive weapons, including nuclear ones, because it's very important that they're dealing with nuclear weapons also. But the US refused to give any of those guarantees. I'd like to be more precise and to repeat that our position is very clear. Each country has the right to choose alliances. However, it's our firm position, and it was declared not only by Russian authorities, but on the high-level meetings on the international fora in Istanbul and in Astana. No country can strengthen its security at the expense of the security of any other country. I think it's rather logical.
I understand your point. I'm just trying to understand are you saying that because the Baltics are farther away, they're on your border, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, right? They're on your border, but you're saying it's not as much as a threat because Ukraine is closer to Moscow? Is that what you're saying?
But Ukraine, in this way, I'd like to add another question and another point that is very, for us, is very dangerous. It's how to denazify the Ukraine states. You know that situation of militarization, demilitarization, is rather understandable. As for the denazify situation, how to do it, maybe you can see it not so in a very clear manner, but we are witnessing that this state, the Ukraine state, is conducting the Nazi policy, very similar to the German one. Germans, I mean, not German, actual state of Germany.
Yeah,
the German of Hitler. For us, it's a real real threat because in Europe, for example, the manifestation of Nazi ideology is banned, but the West turned a blind eye on the situation in Ukraine. We can't ignore radical nationalists who are running around with swastika, parading with torches like in 1930s in Germany, and supported those who killed Russians, Jews, Poles during World War II.
Yeah, Ambassador, have you come across the book Bloodlands by Professor Timothy Snyder of Yale University? I haven't read it myself, but I've been watching some of his interviews about this book, The Bloodlands, and he was saying that the rise of the Nazis in Ukraine was a choice that some Ukrainians made because they thought that Hitler's party or Hitler's fascist movement was less threatening to them than the Stalinist regime in Moscow at the time. So I was wondering what your thoughts are on that.
Unfortunately, I didn't read this book. Maybe I will appreciate you to give me some time to read and to understand.
Basically, his theory is that the Ukraine issue is actually a lot complicated than most people realize, and that it was actually desired by both Germany and Russia, and that there was a tragedy that those who sided with Nazis.
No. I'm explaining that I didn't read the book, but you and the author of this book are putting on the same side the Nazi regime of Hitler and the Soviet Union, who had who won the victory, who did everything to eliminate this Nazi policy in Europe. So maybe this very important also for you. Would like to rewrite the history. But I don't think that we can make the parallel with the Nazi regime and the Soviet Union policy in that time.
But would you say it's fair to point out that the fascist ideology in Ukraine is not state policy because President Zelensky himself is Jewish?
It could be very simple to understand that yes, President Zelensky is Jewish, and his father, as far as well, not grandfather, excuse me, fought on the front of the World War II. But look, very, very simple example. How can a president with the Jewish roots, you said, yes? With his grandfather who fought on the front of World War II, sign a law on indigenous people in Ukraine, and Russia are not listening among the indigenous people? How can a president who is not a racist sign and support laws that ban the Russian language? Not only in school, not only in education, but in everyday life. Another very interesting example, maybe you didn't hear about the tragedy in Odessa after this coup d'etat in 2014. 48 people gathered in House of Trade Unions in May 2014, were burnt alive by pro-Ukrainian activists and nationalists. Nothing. I give another example of this very interesting and very important policy of Mr. Zelensky. What a blockade of Crimea. Did you ever hear about it?
Yes, but as you said,
yes, the decision. No. I'd like to be
okay, Your Excellency.
To give you some details. The decision of Ukraine authorities in order to blockade Crimea in 2014 to not supply the water through the North Crimean Canal. It was which provided 90% of the Crimea's water needs for drinking and household needs. It's in violation of all European and all international conventions. And nothing has done it in this direction. Only during this special military operation, due to the Russian armed force, we opened this canal and water supply was resumed. But can you imagine that 8 long years people lived without water? It's very simple comparison with Nazi regime, who would like to deprive not only the human rights, but the needs of water supplies.
Your Excellency, I encourage you to maybe pick up that book by Timothy Snyder. But another personality that I've seen lately in preparation for this interview, Andrei Kosiv, your former foreign minister.
Yes.
I think the former boss of your
Yes,
current foreign minister now,
yes, directly.
Mr.
Yes,
He's come out critical about as you say, the military action in Ukraine, and he was saying that President Putin might be being fed inaccurate information about the realities both in Ukraine and possibly the realities in Russia itself with regard to its action in Ukraine.
Andrei Kosiv, yes, I worked with him for a long time. Yes, I met him personally many times, but I know also his story.
Mhm.
After being, as far as I know, for 5 years, maybe, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, he became a member of parliament, and then he decided to escape in the United States. Maybe it's his own decision, but he, from my point of view, he lost the same approach to the Russian reality, speaking that my president could be not informed about the real situation in his country and in the international arena. I think that we have a very good mechanism to put my president in current of all the situation, not only in my country, but in the international situation. For example, we have the same mechanism of a meeting of National Security Council. Every week, maybe, but usually every week, President with a member of the Security Council are discussing the actual situation in the world, in the Russian Federation, in the some part of regions. So I think that my president is aware of everything. And so the decisions that has been taken by my president was very wise and very cautious, I can say, because he really understands that in case we will not do these things after the 8 years of our insistence to talk with the West countries, we will lose our national interest, we will lose our future. So I disagree with the opinion of my former minister, Mr. Kosiv. Excuse me, but...
yes, sir. I understand. Maybe if you just help us understand, because right before the military action of Russia in Ukraine, what you call it, Russia recognized the two states to your border in Ukraine, in the Donbass region, Donetsk and Luhansk, I think. And Russia even sent peacekeeping forces in those regions. Why is it necessary to expand the military action outside of those areas? I mean, Russian forces are reportedly bearing down on Kyiv right now. Sir, clearly it's not just in the Donbass.
Yes, I understand the question, but my reply, I've just done it, because we would like not only to peacekeeping, to make peacekeeping in these two regions, these two republics. Lugansk and Donetsk. But I've just said that our goal is to demilitarize and denazify the Ukraine as well. And to make everything to understand, to make understand the Ukraine authorities that only the Ukraine neutral states will be one of our fundamental requirements and the solution of this crisis.
What would you say for those who are saying that that NATO is stronger now because of what's happening in Ukraine? In fact, because of the developments, Germany, for example, is doubling its military spending from 3% of its GDP to 6%, just overnight because of what's happening. NATO seems to be closer now. You have also Finland, who's on your northern border, possibly talking about NATO membership, something it's tried to avoid in the past. It seems that NATO has consolidated, and which is precisely what Russia didn't want. Is that the concern?
As far as I understand, you asked me about how to consolidate the West against Russia.
Yeah, because even the United States was, especially during President Trump was saying, the Europeans should spend for NATO, and that, and relieve the U.S. of that burden. And people were even asking, in some circles were asking whether NATO has outlived its purpose. But now it seems to have done the opposite effect. I mean, it's people are now looking at strengthening NATO. Its member countries are increasing their military spending. And as I said, there are other countries that are possibly now looking to join, primarily Finland. Obviously that must be a concern.
I just need to know that for us, and I repeat it, each country has the right to choose alliances.
Okay.
If Finland would like to enter into NATO treaty, beautiful.
That's their choice.
But no country can strengthen its security at the expense of security of any other country. That is why we are asking all the international community to understand our approach to this issue. I didn't mention another very important thing because we would like to know that there are very dangerous situation regarding the eventual use of nuclear weapons. Because nuclear threat is one of the motivation that could be used by the Ukrainian authorities. The same, you mentioned that President Zelensky have the Jewish roots, but at the same time, just a couple of weeks, he threatened to withdraw from Budapest Memorandum. It's a document by which Ukraine acceded to the Treaty of Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons in 1994. We can't ignore these things. Ukraine has and had nuclear competences since the Soviet times. And they're capable also of launching some such program with nuclear materials. They also have missiles competencies. And they have this help from the Western side. So we should be aware of the situation, a very dangerous situation. Another aspect that I didn't mention is very important, that there is also the biological threat. Because during the special military operations, the Kiev regime was found to have been considering traces of a military biological program implemented with funding, take it into consideration, with funding from the United States Department of Defense. It is not only my consideration, but our Chinese colleagues noticed that the biological military activities of the US in Ukraine are merely only the tip of the iceberg. Using such pretext as cooperating to reduce biological security risk, the US has, it is not my figure, but the figure of our Chinese colleague, 336 biological labs in 30 countries. So the components of biological weapons were being developed in Ukraine laboratories in the proximity of Russian territory. And it was repeated also by my ministry that we are considering that this is a real threat to the Russian security.
Your Excellency, what you describe is, truly frightening. But if that's the case, how come news about Ukraine in Russia is being censored? Your government passed a law recently, even banning or prohibiting the reference to the military action as an invasion. You made it punishable. Facebook is banned. I mean, if these are the situation on the ground, why the need to control the information in Russia itself?
But it's a very good question. But we are talking about not only the prohibition or banning of some information sources. Some of them, they decided to leave Russia
on their own.
without
like BBC,
BBC and also other channels. But yes, if we'd like to talk with this aspect, I'd like to be more clear, because we are talking about the information war. We can use this term as information war because there are a lot of fake news clogging the information space, including here in the Philippines. Unfortunately, I should
I agree with you.
I should recognize the situation as well, because most of them supplied from abroad in local publications, not only the Manila Times that I respect,
yes,
also other leading newspapers. You can see reprints and articles from Washington Post, Associated Press, France Press, so forth. The problem is very clear. They decided to have this kind of information war against Russia. And we, in this case, we should defend ourselves. Unfortunately, it's one of the problems how to defend from this fake news. There's a lot of disinformation regarding the special military operation. The same operation of our military servicemen. Regarding some cities in Ukraine. The picture being created on the world stage is something like out of Hollywood, showing absolute evil and absolute good. And of course, the evil is the Russian. You understand that it's rather simple to verify it. And the good is represented by our collective West.
Yeah, I understand your point, Ambassador. So, we have the opportunity now to talk to you directly. So maybe you can give us the real news. What is Russia's endgame in Ukraine? How do you see this ending? Do you see it ending with Ukraine being part of the Russian Federation again? Do you see Ukraine being split between Russian-controlled areas and resistance-controlled Ukraine? Do you see another scenario, maybe the independence of Donetsk and Lugansk, or something else? I mean, what is your analysis? How do you think this will end?
My analysis is very simple. It's corresponding to our goals is that we would like to achieve to demilitarize Ukraine, to denazify Ukraine, without invading, without occupying the Ukraine. That is why we are conducting our talks, we are negotiating with Ukraine side in order to put an end to unnecessary and senseless bloodshed and resistance to the armed force of Ukraine. We have just elaborated our negotiations track, and you know that 3 rounds of our negotiations in Belarus were held. Mm-hmm. And also,
Turkey also.
I opened your newspapers. Yesterday it was first high-level talks in Turkey. Mm-hmm. With the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation, Mr. Lavrov, and the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, Mr. Kuleba, and with the participation of this meeting of Minister of Foreign Affairs, Chavoshoglu. So we would like to achieve our goals that I've just mentioned, and then it will be the Ukrainian people to settle and to manage the situation after the Russian Federation will achieve these goals. I think it's rather clear. Unfortunately, we are till now on the first steps, I can say. We sent to the Ukraine side our plans how to settle the situation, and the Ukraine side is now studying our proposals. I've repeated that our requirements are very clear. After that, after the requirement will be satisfied, it will be the Ukrainian people to choose their destiny.
They say that, Ambassador, hindsight is 2020. Looking back at the past couple of weeks, do you think Russia could have done things differently to have a more favorable outcome from what we see now? They say that hindsight is 2020. When you look back Of course,
okay.
well, things are,
Yes.
there are always things you could do better.
For sure, yes.
When you're looking back, do you think there are some things that Russia could have done differently?
It could be done another way. Yes. And it was very clear that in 2021, in December, we have proposed to US and to NATO countries some kind of agreements. And we have conducted talks with the US and the NATO countries. In case they would accept it, our proposals, nothing like that could be occurred. But despite our insistent and very logical proposal, unfortunately, we can recognize that the US and the NATO countries refused to fulfill the previous agreement and to came up to our proposals. It could be done in peaceful manner, everything. And I'm, as officer of the foreign minister, as a diplomat, I'm doing everything to settle this crisis. And another question, in diplomatic and peaceful manner. But unfortunately, we should be not only be listening, but we should be also be heard. I don't know whether my answer is clear or not.
Yeah, I have one final question, Ambassador, if you don't mind. With the developments in Ukraine, has there been any impact on your work here in Manila on how bilateral relations are between the Philippines and Russia? Has there been any fallout, or is it the same?
As for my work here in Philippines, I'm feeling quite sure that the current leadership and maybe the future one, I know that in May you have the new leadership in your country, will continue the same policy of cooperation between our two countries. And I know that there is some positive signs of this cooperation. I give you maybe one or two examples. Despite the fact of this situation in Ukraine, we noted that, for example, Department of Energy several days ago of the Philippines declared that the Philippines nuclear power deal with Russia, Rosatom State Energy Corporation, for conducting the feasibility study for the target installation of nuclear power facilities in Bataan.
Okay.
Still stands.
Okay. Not affected by the sanctions.
Yes, it was a very clear, wise statement. So the statement was made because the responsibility of Russia in relation to the use and handling the nuclear energy is not questioned. We would like to proceed in different trends, our cultural cooperation. Yesterday, I got a call from, for example, Moscow authorities who would like to, they're planning to sign an agreement with city of Manila for the strengthening cooperation. It was the regional cooperation. And as I am as ambassador in this country, I'd like to promote this cooperation in different fields, especially in people-to-people connectivity.
Mm.
And our cultural cooperation is well known. And one of the good examples that last year, the local producer finished a very good film from Russia with love.
Russia with love. Okay, sounds like a James Bond film.
From Russia with love. I think that it will be the sense of our conversation, of our sense of responsibility and of our attitude to the Philippines. We would like to continue our cooperation, to our interactions in many fields: cultural, economic, human, being social, regional cooperation. So I think that I have the support from the Department of Foreign Affairs of the Philippines and the leadership of the Philippines to promote this cooperation and to enhance our interactions.
Well, Your Excellency, thank you very much for your time. I'm sure this will be a developing story, and perhaps later on maybe we can call on you again to talk about the latest developments. And I hope, for the sake of the Ukrainians and the Russians, that there will be peace soon in that region.
We are for peaceful solution in everything.
Yes. Thank you very much. Maybe you'd like to have some parting words, a message, Your Excellency?
No, I've just said that we are ready for any peaceful solution, but with respect of our national interests, with respect of our requirements that I've just mentioned during our conversation. Thank you so much, and I'm ready to continue our conversation in very different topics.
Okay.
You mentioned that you would like to elaborate on how we can proceed on our cooperation in different fields. Maybe we can organize the talks regarding one of the topic of your interest. I am ready.